Okay. And if for some reason you can't do something, so like, for example, if you can't do anything, my emails are not to, I think a lot of people don't know if they've submitted stuff or not. So if you haven't done anything, like I'm not mad that you haven't done it. I just truly don't know if you know that you haven't submitted it. Because I know that submission is kind of easy. What I'm thinking about doing is just giving everybody a number so you don't know who's who. And then you can go on to the Excel sheet and just put your scores in yourself rather than having to go to the website and submit it like that. And so then you won't know who's who because you'll just have a number. Thoughts on that? Would you prefer that, or do you like going to the website and just submitting it? Because then you could see what you put in. I don't care either way, but you can think about it. Okay. So I like a 3-minute video to start. Oh, Katie's joining, everybody. You can clap for her. All right, so what's the answer for this question? Katie?
Yes.
What's the answer to this question?
What question?
I'm just kidding.
It's like I want to throw her confetti. Like, congratulations.
A.
Yeah, no, congratulations on your score today.
So that's a good question, a pretty common concern. So people are reading and sometimes they're thinking about something else. You like read 2 paragraphs and you realize I'm 2 paragraphs down. Where the heck was I? So when I was studying for the LSAT, my instructor suggested this. It was weird, so I didn't do it, but it works to some degree for some people. Before you read any passage, this is what he did. Okay, just bear with me here for a second. He closed his eyes and imagined a blue flame and wiggled his toes. Now you might say, what? I'm not going to do that. That's what I said too. But there is value, regardless of how crazy that is, to like getting into the mindset that now I'm going to focus on this. Because so many times when people are doing like sections, they finish the section, it didn't go as well as they'd like. They go into the reading comp section and they're still thinking about the game section. Like, oh, that inference, I get it now. And it's just like, you really got to like let that go and move on. And the same is true between passage and passage, right? You do the first passage and then you're like, okay, I'm done with that. I'm starting another one. So that's tip number 1. I don't know that you need to wiggle your toes or imagine a blue flame, but closing your eyes and saying, okay, reset, I'm now going to start something new is valuable. The second thing I would suggest, and this has been shown in other contexts as well, but it might not hurt to read the first sentence, understand what the topic is. You know, like here, it's like works of art, blah, 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 cinema. And you're like, okay, it's about exhibits. And it says, which work should be exhibited together? And you're like, okay, I don't care. I don't give a shit about this, right? I never plan to be a curator. But you just say to yourself, like how should they be exhibited, right? Like it's weird, but you know how if you fake smile, like you start to feel happy, they've like shown that, right? The same is true with these 2 passages. If you're like, I've never thought about 18th century sculpture in a negative light. You know, I'd like to, what does that mean? Like somehow like that, like you're pretending to yourself, but it gets you a little bit more interested. And if it's enough to keep you paying attention, then that's beneficial. The thing I mentioned earlier was to get angry or a little jaded and frustrated with the passage. For me, that helps because when I'm angry, I tend to be a little more like, okay. But maybe you need to like try to feign interest. Fake it until you make it.
Does it matter that they're broken up into paragraphs?
So that's a great question.
Okay, so I watched that. I was looking for
reading and sometimes
additional tips today, and I didn't have the like confidence to like say that as well as he did. So I'm like, I'm just gonna play the video because I think I would have like chickened out of sharing the wiggling your toes and looking at the flame. However, I do think that's something that I want to learn more about is the psychological approach to this test. A lot of you have been getting your numbers. Many. I need to continue to look at the numbers. I was looking at them as people were submitting them. mass majority of our class is significant. Like you're improving, your numbers are looking good. Cora is like dominant. Like Cora's ready to teach the class. She got a 23 on her last LR section.
I don't know about teaching.
She's ready for it. Which Cora, I want to use you as an example because I don't want to embarrass you at all, but I just think it offers other people so much hope. Like a month ago, you said you were scoring 10 per section.
10. I was getting 10 right, about 10 right.
Yeah, and so like I just like want to say like she's like, and that's not that, and that's like a month of work where I don't think it happened overnight. Where I remember Cora like was still missing a lot of questions, but her thought process was correct. Even though she was still missing a lot of questions, her thought process was getting better. And that's one thing that we really have to hone into is it doesn't always show up right away in our numbers. And that's really annoying. But if you do feel yourself understanding more and you do feel yourself reading stimuluses and getting them and finding conclusions and at least knowing how to approach the question, that could be 3 steps farther than you were 2 weeks ago. And you do need to celebrate that. It's not always like, it sounds so like, it's not always about getting the question right. And that's where I think a lot of people lose motivation is their score isn't changing. So they don't celebrate what they've actually learned. I think Cora is a really good example of that. So good job, Cora.
Thank you. And I have to say like, that's 100% true because I was using LSAT Max, before I met you and some other, resources. And we and I've talked about this. At no point are they like, okay, where's the conclusion? Or there was no interaction until I was in one of your classes and having to point that out and be okay if I got it wrong, because then I figured out how to do it right.
Right, because we ask the questions. You cannot be afraid to, you cannot be afraid to get it wrong. So right. I signed up for tutoring today for myself just to like, not for the LSAT, but for like law school, just to like, I don't know, because like I wanted to see. And I asked my tutor, I was like, do I have to be embarrassed if I get the question wrong? And so I told him how he has to set up a room. I'm like, I can't feel embarrassed. It was like a reminder of like how scary it is to answer. And I'm like, because he asked me like, well, what happened on that case? And I'm like, I don't know anything about law yet. And I was like, so afraid to say anything. But that makes, so.
Have you seen The Paper Chase? It's an older movie.
No, I should.
Yeah, it's really good. And it really points out what happens on your first day of 1L.
I'm so scared of it. So I'm like, ugh. Okay, anyway, so that was great. And Taylor, you've had really good numbers. You've seen significant improvement as well. So like, that's awesome. Because like you've got, like 5 or 6 points-ish, right?
Yeah, like I think it was last week, like one of the LR sections. I mean, granted it was untimed, but still I got a 20 out of 25 and I've never gotten that high on blind review anywhere with LR. So I felt really good.
That's amazing. And it's not like you have to stay at 20 forever. It's that you can do it, and like it's trying to keep that positive correlation going. Like nobody scores the same section every week. Like that's just not possible. But you want to stop. If you have occasional 13s or 14s, you want it to eventually become like, a 15, like 16, and slowly building that up. So that's awesome. Which is part of the reason I do have you doing so many time sections is I do need to get kind of a baseline for everybody to see this is about where you're at. All right, so today we're going to start off with reading comp basics. Last week we talked a lot about that. We talked about very introductory things. We mentioned that there's 4 different topics. Many people, except for I believe it was Jasmine, right? Are you a scientist, Jasmine? Or was it? Or who was the scientist?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, Jasmine, except for Jasmine. So Jasmine, you can help teach tonight too. Scientists tend to be the scariest for most people, and so that's why we're going to start with them first. And basics, when it comes to science, we don't have to actually be a scientist, but he did say fake it till you make it. So tonight we're all going to be scientists. And we only have 15 to 17 sentences that we have to actually do that for. And if we can start changing our attitude now, we're fake it till you make it, and we can start to lean into these science. Actually, Josh told me today though that he likes science passages and he thinks they're easy. And so he can help teach too. But part of it is because if we can stop being so intimidated by the content, the questions are significantly easier. And a lot of people miss science questions because they either skip them or they read it, they know they don't understand it, and then they just keep going. So it's kind of like one of those conversations with people. Have you ever had a conversation with someone and they're telling you what to do and you're just like shaking your head and shaking your head, even though you have no idea what they're saying, and you just keep shaking your head and shaking your head, and then you walk away and you have no idea what was actually said because you're too afraid to stop them and say, hey, I don't understand what you're saying, and ask clarifying questions. Well, on the like when we're reading a passage, we can't just keep reading and reading and hope that we're going to come across the answer. We have to be like, have the confidence to stop the conversation or stop reading and ask ourselves or ask questions to try to figure it out. And so we have 7 weeks until the test, which is awesome because especially these next 3 weeks, our priority should be becoming better readers because the questions are going to come. The questions are going to be so much easier if we really put all our energy into becoming better readers. So that's my pep talk for today. We can move into the content. So basics for approaching, this could be applied to anything other than just sciences, but I think that the taking the deep breath and how he said the fake it till you make it is most applicable for many students in the science passages. Like we cannot be afraid of it. I was someone that was very afraid of science passages. I think I was told in like 3rd grade, I thought I was dumb, and I just hated science ever since. And it definitely showed on my LSAT. I remember on the ACT, it was like my lowest score significantly, but finally I was told, hey, you can do it. And on these science passages, I actually learned to figure it out because we're capable of doing it. The secret to it is engaging. It's not a secret. I think everybody says this. It's engaging with the passage. It's really hard to engage with the science passage because most of us don't have opinions on it. So if you don't have an opinion on a topic, make one up. You now have, like, if they're like birds are bad for the environment, you're either going to say birds are bad for the environment or you're going to disagree with it and have some, like he said, have some emotion towards it. So whenever you pick a side or you engage with it or have some type of emotion towards it, you're more likely to notice subtle details, whether that is a word or a tone or like tone strength, or whenever someone's bringing in another idea, because if someone agrees with you, you're like, they agree with me, right? You're like, yeah, that's right. But if someone disagrees with you, you have that little bit of confrontation that happens. And you're like, wait, well, how do you know that it's slightly more? Like, and you notice the word slightly different than significantly more, where there's a big difference between slightly and significantly. And so that we have to, like he said, fake it till we make it. We're going to practice it. So rereading sentences that don't make sense. This goes back to the conversation that we had earlier. If we read, like, we have a conversation and we just keep nodding our head and praying that we eventually come to the answer, it's obviously not going to happen. And so we're going to do a little bit of a drill tonight of how we can actually check. It's actually a different drill I haven't used before that I just thought of it today. And I was like, I think this is going to work. Rereading sentences that don't make sense. And how can we judge I'm always looking for smaller ways to judge success. And we're going to work on how can we judge our success of reading these passages. React to what you're reading. Does it seem reasonable, unreasonable, or just weird? That reaction is very important because whenever we react to something, we remember it, right? Try to predict where the author is going after each sentence. This is something that you probably cannot do you can't constantly be predicting. In your reading comp drill that we're doing, like your daily RC drill, you can be doing that. If you're significantly struggling with a passage, use this. It might, on the actual test, I did not predict after every single sentence, even though in that drill I would practice it, practice predicting where it's going. But when I was on the actual test, it would probably be every 3 or 4 when I would notice like a chunk, and I'd be like, and some of you that have had one-on-one lessons with me, I've done it before. I'm like, I bet this is where they're going. And if they do go there, I feel affirmation and I'm all proud. And if they don't, I'm like, well, that's stupid, but I'm paying attention. And that's a reaction, and that's good. And so that's why that's how we get to own these passages. And then after we're done reading it, we're going to restate the main point in your own words. And that, like, we've been told this our whole lives, like, how you can't just use the words they're using in the passage, right? Because yeah, anybody can re-say the words and be like, well, yeah, well, the first paragraph said this, and then they did this, and then they did that. Okay, cool. I don't want a summary. I want to know why the author wrote this. Why did the author make us, why like that previous slide said, why are we wasting our time with this? It wasn't just so that we could, if we're just going to memorize what it said and like spew it back, like they might as well just read the article, right? Reading comprehension, there's a meme out there and I try to search for it, but I think someone must have created it. And like, it's not like a overly popular one where it says the moment, maybe Cora, you sent it to me. I can't remember, where it says like the moment you realize that reading comprehension is reading comprehension. And that sounds really silly, but like reading comprehension is, I think everybody focuses on the questions, but really what reading comprehension is being able to comprehend what you're reading. And comprehension isn't like just reading the words. Comprehension is actually understanding what it's saying. And there's a difference between those two things. Are we on a good pace so far? Awesome. So passages, this is something that I had never thought of it this way today, but because I've always thought of it like bigger picture, but I like putting it into these two buckets. Passages are either persuasive or informative. Rather than thinking about all the I think some other people put all these other crazy structures out there. And I really like how simple this is. It's either trying to persuade you of something or it's trying to inform you of something. So after we're done, it's really important to know, are we being persuaded of something or are we just being educated on something? Because if we know that, that comes back to what the goal, what's the main point? If we know that, that really fills into what that main point is. And that's a simple question that we can answer to help guide us. The main point will not necessarily be one sentence in the passage. That's something that I really struggled with when I was studying. I really struggled with main point questions, actually. It was easier for me to pull out the details. Main point questions, I just wanted to say it all. Like, this is what happened, blah, 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 blah. But I didn't focus on what the author was saying. And I think sometimes when we, like, at least in school for me, the main point, whenever you do like reading comp on the ACT or something like that, the main point was always a good summary. And that's not what the main point, think of the main point as the claim or the conclusion, the purpose. Even though main point and primary purpose are they can be different questions, they overlap so much when we're finding those answer choices. And then lastly, what is the author trying to prove or convey? Those last points kind of all go into what is the main point, some things that we can think about as we're coming up with those main points before we attack the questions. Any questions on this so far? See, hands. Oh, okay. So we're going to do the prep test. If everybody can pull out their test 45 passage 3 that you did, I did save it to a file so I can send it, except for Trish, because you won't be able to download it, right? If I send it via the chat. So if you have like writing on yours, I submitted a new one to the chat that you could just pull up to if you like.
Were you looking for 45 or 46?
45 passage 3.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, this is homework.
Katie loves this one, by the way, Nicole.
What?
Katie loves this one.
Oh, have you guys already dove deep into this one?
Yes.
Unfortunately,
Good. Well,
I don't.
It is a hard one, which is why I picked it. I do want to point, I wanted to point something out on the homework though. So we're doing science passages tonight. So the homework are all of these passages, and I have on the website too. I'll talk about this more at the end. I just want to show the organization is I picked out science passages so that we all can practice one science passage a day for our reading comp drill this week, so that we can just really lean into owning this and not being intimidated. All right, so my new, what I think is going to be the next big thing in LSAT learning is for this drill is, and this is what I want to add to the reading comp drill, is for each sentence, after I'm done reading it, if I understand it right away, like, and that means like pause, not having to reread it, but pretty quickly, like it's a short sentence, I'm gonna put a plus next to it. So one sentence. So if I would read this sentence and I would get it right away, I would just put a plus and I'll go on to my next one. And so let's say this second one I read and it's one that I have to restate. If I have to restate it a couple times, but I get it, I'm gonna put a check. And if I'm reading it and hopefully I eventually get to it where I'm understanding it, but I'm really struggling, I'm gonna put a negative, a minus. And at the end, we're gonna do this for all 17 sentences. And I think it sounds crazy, but I think it's going to help us understand where we got confused. Does that make sense? Are we following this? So there's 17 sentences, and how we can judge our progress is how many times are these checks transitioning to pluses, and how many times are things that we didn't. Actually, Derek, your question triggered this to me. I was like, well, how can I help people that they're not sure why sometimes they're getting the stimuluses and sometimes they're not? Well, this will give us a numerical way to judge it, because it's easy for us to feel like we're not understanding something, but really we've made significant progress, and we just feel, it's easy to see our flaws. And so I'm hoping this, with our drills at the end of the week, can be like, oh wow, I actually am becoming a better reader. Look how much I'm telling myself I'm understanding. Does this sound helpful, or does it sound crazy? You can tell me I'm crazy. You're welcome to.
No, that's a great point, actually. So, I mean, I have been struggling with.
Get me on something.
Can you demonstrate it for us?
Yes, no, that's what we're gonna do. Or what? Me demonstrate something? And so let me see what okay, good. Okay, so I'm gonna do the first paragraph together of how, and I'm gonna read this out loud. So a lichen consists of and I might do terrible because these might all be really hard sentences. Like it's science, and science is my weakest, and I don't tend to know what it means. So if I were going to do this, a lichen consists of a fungus living in symbiosis, i.e. a mutual beneficial relationship with an algae. So this actually is I actually understand this sentence, even though I don't know what any of these words mean. I just know that there's this thing that consists of, I'm going to explain it back to you so that we can understand it together. But this one I kind of caught on, that there's this fungus living with that, that a lichen is a fungus that's in a mutual relationship with an alga. Like so they mutually beneficial, they work together. This sentence I would have read and I wouldn't have had to spend a lot of time on to think about it. So I would have put a plus next to it. Although most branches of the complex evolutionary family tree of fungi have been well established, the evolutionary origins of lichen-forming fungi have been a mystery. So this is where you can still give yourself a plus if you have to take 5, 6, 7 seconds afterwards to let yourself catch up. Because like I just think some of us, I don't think I ever will never not have to do that. But for this sentence, I'm thinking, okay, although most branches of the complex, so although most of the, so say I'm struggling on this one, and I have to take longer than the 5 to 10 seconds to picture it or to imagine it. And so for here, it's saying most, so more than 50% of the branches of the complex evolutionary family tree of fungi. So this fungus that is one of my options has this complex history. The evolution origins of lichen-forming fungi have been a mystery. Okay, so we're saying that even though it's been well established for fungi, the lichen-forming fungi is a mystery. So this one I had to think about, so I'm going to put a check. So I got it, but it wasn't intuitive for me. But a new DNA study has revealed the relationship of lichen-forming fungi to several previous known branches of the fungus tree. So this one's pretty self-explanatory for me. Like I understand this, we're saying, all right, there's this new study that shows that the relationship between the two things is known, or fungi, relationship of the lichen forming fungi to several previously known branches of the fungus family tree. Like, I get that. Like, I'm like, okay, this study shows this relationship. The study reveals that far from being oddities, lichen-forming fungi are close relatives of such common fungi as brewer's yeast, morel mushrooms, and the fungus that causes Dutch elm disease. So if you understand what this is saying, and you're like, oh, we're adding we're also showing what else we're related to. I get it, check, or plus. This accounts for the visible similarity of certain lichens to more recognizable fungi such as mushrooms. So let's say I'm really struggling with this one and I'm trying to think, okay, this accounts for the visible similarity. And maybe I'm really struggling to think about like, what could be a visible similarity? I don't really understand. Why is this more recognizable? If I feel really uncomfortable and I feel like I could not restate this to my partner in my own words, I'm gonna just do a minus sign. And so at the end, we're gonna see how many of these minus signs we have. And we're gonna start, not yet, but what we're eventually going to do is compare our minus signs to the number of questions we're getting wrong. Because I think we're going to see a correlation, not that causation equals correlation, but I think we're going to see a correlation between the number of minus signs we get and the number of questions we get wrong. Does this make sense? Awesome. Okay, so if you have this pulled up, I would like everybody silently to do the next 2 paragraphs on their own. So if you have it pulled up, go ahead and read it, and I want you all to keep track of your pluses and your minuses.